Guilderland Board of Education. Would you all please silence your cell phones and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda this evening is our high school student representative.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start with some news with the student government. So the student government is working with the school administration to work on planning the student walkout, which will be happening on March 14th. The GHS Spirit Week was held last week, and due to the snow day last week, we had to postpone the dodgeball tournament, so it will be held on Friday, March 9th. On March 29th, the GHS Annual Cultural Fair will be held, and the students will be representing their country using a poster, or they're going to be doing a performance. The spring musical, also known as the Music Man, will be held at GHS from March 15th to 18th. In sport-related news, spring sports started on Monday, and the quarter 3 interim ends today, which means that half of the quarter is over and only 5 more weeks remain of quarter 3. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public comment number 1. We have 2 individuals signed up this evening, and just as a reminder, in accordance with our policy, I'd ask that you keep your comments to between 3 to 5 minutes. And the first person is Baswa Shaker.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I just wanted to discuss or explain few things. I generally travel a lot. I used to go through airports, and most of the time I used to go like last minute. I came here last minute, so I never used to take for more than 5 minutes, but that was 10 years back. But now I have to go at least 1 hour before even domestic or international flights, because I have to go through a lot of security. And also I never used to go to IRS. I always used to apply online, and everything used to be online. Then suddenly recently I had to go to IRS, visit a local office. And I was surprised the security. There were some maybe 20 employees working in the building, and I had to go through big security. Like that, I have seen a lot of places nowadays, you have to go through security. And places like countries no longer as safe as it used to be, and we all know. And we know that what is happening like all the time, every month. This year already 18 places, the school shootings happened, and we are all aware. And last week I sent an email to principal that Niskon High School is like increasing the security level, and they sent a communication to the school district. Then even Monday morning I saw one going out from Guilderland School District also. I think this may not be enough. As we know that the way things are going, we need to have more security, because my 2 kids are here in Guilderland High School, and I'm really worried like most other parents. So I want the board to really think seriously on this matter and come out with some really strong measures for kids' security. I know kids are no big employees, they don't have PEF or any union behind them, but I think we are all there, parents and also board, staff, we are all there. It's our duty to make sure that our kids are safe. I hope everybody agrees with that. So I really appreciate if you can take this seriously and do something so that we don't hear many of these. I know that we're not going to stop it, but at least if we can reduce, we can control some of them, that will save some of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next we have Erica Smith.
Hi, I also am talking about the same problem as a school resource officer. I have 2 children that go to Pine Bush Elementary School, and I'm also concerned about security at our schools. I recently spoke to Guilderland Police and having more school resource officers available to us. What happened in Parkland is devastating, and I don't want that to happen here. And it shouldn't happen here, and it shouldn't happen anywhere. So we have 1 school resource officer at our school at the high school, and we don't have one at the middle school, and we don't have anything at the elementary schools. And we know that it doesn't just happen at the high school level, it happens at every level. So I spoke to the police department in Guilderland, and they are more than willing to have police officers at our school as school resource officers. And there is a cost to the district, and they said it's about a 20% cost to the district, and they provide the rest, or maybe it could be funded through the state. I'm not 100% sure of the whole funding. I did speak to them because when you went to Parkland, the security officer did not enter the building. They said they are trained through an ALER training, and also tactical first aid. So they would be able to enter the building, they would be able to suppress a shooter. They said that this district is large. They would not be able to get to us if something were to happen here. It would take several minutes. That is really scary when you think about how large this district is, where our children are. I don't want anything to happen to anybody's children here. Whether, I just have kids at Pine Bush. I don't want to have anything to happen to kids at the high school, middle school. They're all our children. When you think about a community-raised children, this is everybody's children. So when I think about this, and I know we're in a fiscally tight environment, what do we ask of our citizens, even though we don't want to go over the tax cap? If we even ask for 60 cents on $1,000 assessed, it's on a $200,000 house, it's $120 a year to get a second police officer in our school, to the middle school to start. Is that something we can look into? Is that something we can start to look into? I would rather have something to protect our children, a police officer, because I do not feel comfortable with anybody else in our school, than somebody that's truly trained to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent's draft budget presentation. Marie?
I probably should mention Pat Fahey first.
Sure.
Pat Fahey was on our agenda to join us this evening. She is our assembly member who represents us. I happened to see her earlier today. The conference that she is part of had a not emergency meeting, but a close to emergency meeting tonight, and they are talking about education issues. So it had been her plan to come here and talk with us on how things are going. She said, well, she could leave, stay at the offices downtown and come here and talk with us briefly and then go back. I think it is far more important for her to be down there advocating for us as they're putting together their one-house budget. So we're going to reschedule Assembly Member Fahey to come either next Tuesday night when we do the Q&A based on our budget, or the following Tuesday night. And she sends her sincere regrets not to be here tonight, but she does good work for us, and so we'll be flexible. And so now we can do the budget.
Just count down. Worked hard on this PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Pine Bush.
Yeah.
I thought they were getting that.
So that means,
No, it has to go to fourth grade, because this current third grade is the one that.
right, so they'll go, when they go to fourth, this next year,
Yeah.
looks like they're heading this way.
Yeah. That was like a done deal even back in the fall.
That's what I thought, but I never,
But that doesn't mean anything.
right.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking.
No, I was
Gilman
trying to,
Elementary, because
no.
there's something going on with second to third.
items while we're trying to.
Oh, really?
Sure.
Sixth.
Okay, so we're going to, while we figure out the technology, move on to a couple of other items. So following the superintendent's draft budget presentation, we have approval of the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the regular meeting from February 13th, 2018, the CPSE and CSE recommendations, personnel action items, and the financials. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Alan, second. Seema? Are there any questions or comments? Alan?
I have a question. Last month when we looked at the financials, we did, I think we did some budget transfers. Are they reflected in the report that we have here? Because I didn't see the budget numbers change. So wouldn't they typically change when we do those budget transfers so we can line up budget to what the new budget is after the transfer so we can see what the expenditures are?
We discussed that in the Business Practices Committee, and the consensus of the Business Practices Committee was to have the transfers put in so they're reflected in the report when they're approved.
But this is the January report, so they were approved at last meeting, so why wouldn't they be included in the January numbers?
It should be. I can go back and look at it.
No, I couldn't tell if they were or not. So my question really is, are they? If they are, if you could just, shoot us an email and let us know.
Okay.
Because I like to look at it to see where we are in comparison to budget versus the actual and how much we're going to encumber and where I think we're going to have some potential problems and/or pickups.
And they may have been included already, again, going back to the practice of having them included when the board approves them. So we talked about both ways, so. But
Okay, no, that's fine.
certainly
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
That's why I was asking the question, okay?
Yep.
That's
Any
it.
other questions?
No.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0.
Before we go on, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome an employee that you just appointed, who's sitting with Cliff Nooney tonight, our new Assistant Superintendent for Buildings and Grounds, Ellen Tosick. Today was her first day. Tomorrow will be snowy, so we're breaking her in. So we wanted to welcome you, Ellen, and thank you for coming tonight to join us.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Neil? Oh, you look like you. We're going to say something.
No, Damien just stole my laptop.
Okay. Okay, so now we move to information items, and we can go, do you want to go, or do you want me to?
Why don't I go?
Okay, we will move to superintendent information items. Marie?
All right. First item on the agenda is a reminder about our joint trustee meeting with the Guilderland Public Library trustees, which will happen next week on March 14th at 6 p.m. We'll be meeting at the library, and we have a team of representatives from Guilderland School District coming and meeting with, I think, 3 or 4 of the trustees from the Guilderland Public Library. The agenda will be out tomorrow, but I'll tell you the 4 items that will be on there for your information. Our first item will talk about capital project improvements. Both the school district and the library are in the beginning stages of talking about capital improvements, so we'll have a discussion about that. Also, we'll be bringing to both boards' attentions the need to review the MOU that exists between the library and the school district. It hasn't been updated in many, many years, and there are some things that have changed in that we probably down the road should put together a little working committee to update that. The third item is to talk about some of our programmatic collaborations, things that we've done recently in the past that have worked well, and also to talk about some potential next steps. And the last item is the ever-popular items for the good of the order. So that will be on March 14th, and we're looking forward to that meeting. My next
Question.
item, oh, sorry, Alan.
My question would be, I don't know what that MOU is that we have, so can you put it in the weekly update so we can read it and have some advance
Sure.
notice of what it is? And then the next question I have is, when they do the capital plan, that's the first item on the agenda, are they going to address what they may or may not want to do with that land that we acquired on February 28th? I don't know if it's part, I don't know, I don't know if that's part of the agenda. That would be a question that I would.
I think that would fall under potential capital plans for both, and that's certainly a question that's worth asking.
Okay.
It's really a discussion, so we can kind of understand what each organization is working on right now. So that's a fair...
Agreed. I just think that would be a question we should kind of ask so we can have some anticipation of what's going to take place with that piece of property, okay?
Yes. My next item, I've recently been at 2 conferences. I was at the American Association of School Administrators Conference earlier in February in Nashville. And just this past Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I was downtown at the New York State Council of School Superintendents Conference and Advocacy Day. I'll just focus on the New York State Conference. The focus of the conference, the title was called Difficult Conversations, and it was the themes really focused around how school districts can do a better job having difficult conversations around race, gender, marginalized populations in order to make sure that we're serving all students well. We had some terrific guest speakers. The other part of the conference was really our advocacy work, and following this morning's session with Tom DiNapoli, our comptroller, who was our keynote speaker, teams of superintendents went up the hill to meet with our elected representatives to talk about the various proposals that are in the governor's budget proposal and how they could potentially impact us in our various school districts. So it was a very full 3 days, very productive advocacy event earlier today. So we heard some somewhat encouraging news, which is good. The highlight of the conference for me, though, was that we had 2 of our own students, Christopher Roy and Julia Marlette, in our media program, who were invited to assist the videographer who captured scenes from the conference. And they worked all day Sunday and all day Monday as, it was Robert Hendricks, who we know, working as his assistant as he did videography, capturing the conference, and it's been turned into a video series of clips, which we'll share some with the board. And I asked Chris and Julia if they would come to one of our board meetings and tell us what they learned and what their experience was like. But I can't tell you how many times I was stopped by my colleagues to just compliment them on their professionalism, and, you know, it made me very proud, and they were terrific contributors to the event. So that was the highlight for me. Questions?
That sounds great. I'm so proud of the kids when they do things like that.
So I see that we have a,
That was easy.
Just keep your fingers crossed, but it appears to be
so shall I keep going, or do we want to segue over to the budget? I have a lot of stuff still here. So.
Yeah, we can segue over to the budget and then we'll come back.
Okay, fair enough. So stay tuned for the calendar. That's the wrong PowerPoint.
What's on the desk? I pulled up whatever was on the desk. There's multiple ones. I pulled the wrong one.
That's February.
Display's not lit again. You mean, display's not coming up.
We need an 8-year-old. We need to start making a presentation.
Stuff happens whether we're for the second graders.
Kathy, can I? No.
Luckily, one of them can usually show at least
The
me
teacher.
how to do it.
We need an 8-year-old.
That's what we need. You're a cheap date. Where are the boys?
That's right.
I think earn their badge. Tech badge.
We'll talk about why we need some new technology. I don't think I'll need to say another word about that.
I didn't plan this, by the way.
Yes, you did. I'm sure you
I
did.
swear I did not.
The suspense, I know, was building and building. So let me start by saying welcome all who have come to hear our first draft of our spending plan for the 2018-2019 school year. I want to start with a lot of thank yous. I want to begin with our leadership team, many of whom are sitting here tonight because they've been working on this behind the scenes since mid-October. I'd also like to thank all the people who participated in our feedback loops, so our Board of Education who took a survey, our community who participated in our priority survey, many individuals who emailed into our addresses on our budget proposals to provide insight and their views on the relative importance of various things that we're proposing. So all of that goes into the decision-making that brings us here tonight to what I will remind you is the first draft of our budget. It's far from done. So we have the following things we'd like to accomplish in the next little bit of time here. We're going to start with just an overview of our goals and the budget development process so you have a feel for the work that we did. After that, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Sanders to review kind of the financial context for our budget development. And then he'll hand it back to me for the review of the changes that we're proposing for 2018-2019. These are the decision points that we've been working through for the past several weeks. And then last but not least, we'll talk about next steps in the budget development process. And an important point I want to make here is that all we're doing tonight is presenting the budget. A week from today, March 13th at 7 o'clock, we'll do the formal Q&A, and that will give everybody a full week to work through the volumes of information you now have before you so that you can feel comfortable getting at the questions that you have, and we'll be here as long as it takes for everyone to have their questions answered. Beyond that, there will always be more opportunities for feedback and for questions, leading right up to the time at which we adopt the budget in April. So the key questions that drive our work in budget development each and every year have to do with, well, what is it that we care about? And hence the surveys that we do. We want to know what our community cares most deeply about. And then we also look deeply into what do our students need, and that's where the analysis of data and a close review of our students comes into play in this work. And then the hard part, the less glamorous part, comes down to the question of what can we afford now and sustain over time, and in a time when we are in a challenging financial and fiscal environment. And I have to say that when we started talking about the budget in the fall, we didn't expect to have such a difficult financial set of circumstances. You know, the rhetoric that you hear around is that the economy is improving and things are better. And in fact, if you remember our budget work last year, it was almost comfortable. So we were not anticipating that we would go into this process with a pretty big deficit between what we anticipated our expenses would be and the revenue available to us. So this became very challenging very quickly. But I just remind everybody that what we are talking about in tonight's presentation is really the financial manifestation of our mission. What do we really care about in the work that we do each and every day? And of course, it always has to come back to our students. So I'll remind you, as I do each year, about our mission statement. I won't read it to you again, but you know that we care deeply about all children, each and every one, and the future that we're preparing them for. And that gets manifested in our vision statement, where we talk about how we're going to do that. But I have, in kind of my shorthand, I think about our work this way: all kids, future ready. And then that's the work that we're doing. Every last one of those youngsters who comes to each day, each of them needs to be ready for his or her future. So this is a process, the budget development process, and in the last couple of years we've put together a visual that outlines kind of all the places where our community can weigh in and help us understand those priorities that we're trying to wade through. And so that visual is on the right-hand side of the screen. Just to highlight that we are far from done with this budget is that if you look on the right-hand side of our visual, the third big red text bubble down says March 6th. So we're really only about halfway through this process. So there's a long way to go before we have a finished product. And I, again, will invite people to contribute as we work along this pathway. So I want to highlight just some of the ways in which we've had various groups weigh in on what's important. So back in early December, board members may remember this, it seems a long time ago now, that we asked each of the board members to complete a survey that would give us a feel for the programmatic priorities that they have, that when they think about what matters most to them, what should we be thinking about? And this is a list that captures, I think, the items that came up the most in that list. But there's a tremendous variety of interests and priorities, and certainly made the work of figuring out how to fit this all into our budget a nice challenge, but we always appreciate that challenge. Another question that we asked our board had to do with the use of fund balance. As you know, fund balance can be used as a source of revenue to support the subsequent year's spending plan. And we're always having a conversation about what's the right amount of fund balance to use. So we asked our board members, and you can see the direction that we got. The vast majority said none or as little as possible. A couple said the same as the current year, and one said more than the current year. But I'll remind everybody that this survey was done before the bottom fell out of our financial challenges. So things, I think, seemed better in early December than they did even at the end of December. The other question we asked had to do with board members' feelings about trying to overcome the tax levy limit. And you can see that there's not a lot of appetite for that. So 8 of the 9 said none or only if it's a dire last resort, and one who wants some more information. So what we'll present tonight does not attempt to pierce that tax cap that's out there. So we also wanted our community to weigh in. So this is the second year that we did more of an online vehicle for collecting feedback from our community. And I'm very appreciative for all those who logged into the website, the SurveyMonkey tool, and told us what was important to them. As you see, we had 1,346 individuals respond, which is the most ever. And we broke them out a little bit by groups of individuals. So 1,163 of those individuals are school district residents. 595 are parents with children currently enrolled in our schools. We had close to 400 Guilderland High School students and 341 employees. So in the survey, we asked them about 18 general topics that capture much of the work that we do here in our school district. And we asked them to rank them in level of importance. And the highest level important was defined as essential and critical to our mission. And the lowest level was not important at all, and there were items in between. But I just want you to take a look at the top group of vote getters, per se. And for the second year in a row, and I think this resonates with some of the comments we heard from 2 of our community members tonight, the top priority is to have safe and secure buildings. And it was 61% of our, this is the entire group of 1,300 plus people who responded that. And it works its way down: academic supports, transportation, support for social emotional growth, support for our students with disabilities, up-to-date technology, going to work on that, smaller class sizes, the arts, and support for our ENL students. We broke this data out a little bit by the various populations. This slide captures residents and parents, and you will notice that the two lists of top 4 items are very, very close. The only difference is support for students' social and emotional growth and academic support for struggling students are flipped, are opposite in the 3rd and 4th spot across these two populations. In the next slide, I capture students and employees. And I'll just point out that students and parents, aside from a little variation in the percentage amounts, are identical to their parents. And then you can see employees also shared their priorities with real concern for academic support for struggling students, interest in smaller class sizes, support for students' social emotional growth, and then, of course, maintaining safe and secure buildings. We also asked the group, we know we have a financial challenge. How do you think we should close our gap? So we said, should we look at fund balance? Should we look at reducing spending? Should we challenge the tax cap or something other? And that is the overall population, the 1,300 plus individuals, and their response to that question. And you can see the most went to the reduction of spending. Some use of fund balance, some indicated go ahead and challenge the cap, and the others typically said, can you do a combination of things, which in fact you'll see is exactly what we've done. And then below here, I've just broken out by the various groups that we just shared, residents, employees, parents, and students, how they might differently divide up how we go about closing the gap. This is posted to our website if you want to study it in some more detail. So let me segue over into process and talk a little bit about the work that we've done to bring us to here, this point tonight. So we start the 18-19 budget by looking at the decisions we made in the spring of 2017 and asking the question in the fall, now that we're living the decisions that we made, were these good decisions? Are we adequately supporting our students? Have we met their needs? Do we have the resources that we need? We call that stage 1 of our budget development process. Stage 2 is really captured in the second bullet when we do that detailed analysis of student needs. And we look at things like enrollment, that's a big driver of many of our decisions, but we also look at all of the other needs that students bring to us, academic, social, emotional, and other. It's a big part of the discussion. And then from the non-instructional side, we spend a lot of time talking about safety, security, facilities, transportation, all of those pieces that that we need in order to run school. This year was difficult because we had this third bullet, which we had to have a conversation about what spending reductions might each and every one of our leaders put forward to close our projected revenue shortfall, which at the time of this exercise was $1.6 million. So we asked every administrator to come up with 2% of their current year budget as potential reductions. In that way we could have choices to figure out how we would solve this dilemma. And the reason for that is, we have essentially flat state aid. Our foundation aid went up $57,000 from last year to this. Our tax levy limit is 2.2%, and we know we're not going above that. But we have increased costs, and Mr. Sanders will highlight some of those, but retiree contributions went up. That too was a surprise to us because at least until the last couple weeks, the stock market had been very strong, and usually those two things are inversely related. We have contractual obligations, and just other costs of doing business have gone up. So kind of getting to the punchline of where we landed on this budget, some of the things that this budget does do. So we have incorporated savings from lower costs for some expenditures. For example, out-of-district placements for students with disabilities. Debt payments are way down. Our utilities are actually down. I want to just say a sentence about the first example there of the out-of-district placements for students with disabilities. These are students who have reached the age of 21 and are moving on to post-secondary adult kind of programming. So it's not necessarily students who are returning from out-of-district placements to come to school here. The vast amount of savings that we have determined are really for students who are moving on to that next stage in their life. We do have some additions to programs and services based on student needs. And we also have some reductions to programs and services to close revenue shortfalls. So this is a budget presentation that's about give and take, give and take, give and take. And in fact, we have used fund balance, and we've used more fund balance than last year, at least at this point in the process, in order to avoid reductions that we know would have a significant impact on students. So that's what we did do. Here's what we did not do. We did not include many of the items that were brought to our attention from our program leaders and principals as things they would like to see incorporated in the budget. So additional FTEs for reading, FTEs connected to teaching American Sign Language, more staffing around our media program are just examples. We also had requests for furniture, equipment, technology, hardware, and software that did not make this version of the budget. But the next thing we did not do is we did not reduce the number of teaching assistant hours, teaching assistant time in grades K and 1. We heard very loudly and clearly when we had the community gathered here on February 13th, I think it was, that this is a high priority for our community, so we were able to leave those full hours in the budget. And we are not challenging the tax levy limit and seeking a 60% supermajority with this particular spending plan. So with that, Mr. Sanders, it's all you.
Health insurance costs are still good. Thank you and good evening. As Dr. Wiles mentioned, I'll be talking more specifically about the dollars and cents portion of the budget. But to start with, we always need to talk about our beginning point, and it starts with staff in a lot of cases, because we are driven by an industry that does use a lot of people in terms of education. But to start with, talk a little bit about the approved budget that we have in place this year. It's $98,484,110. It was approved by the voters by 72% plurality. We had a budget increase of 1.96% and an estimated tax rate increase of 1.61%. Some of the facts about enrollment: we have 4,840 students. In addition to that, we have another 90 students that are either in OCs, private, or alternative placements, or attend charter schools. So we have a financial responsibility for those students, but they're not housed in our 7 school buildings. We also have 655 full-time staff and 276 part-time staff for a total of 931. The distribution is 475 teachers, 428 support staff, and administrators and supervisors coming at 28. So in total we have 931 employees. A little bit about enrollment. We do have some enrollment growth at the elementary level. We're looking at an increase of 92 students there. We do have a slight decline in enrollment at the middle school and high school level. So at the middle school level, we're looking at a reduction of 33 students, and at the high school level, 14 students. So overall, the net of all of that is an increase of 45 students going to next school year. In the fall, we do what's called a rollover budget projection. It gives us an idea based on what we can ascertain at that point in time and project at that point in time about what the budget situation looks like. We don't have a lot of solid data to work with at that time, but it gives us a perspective going forward about how we should approach the budget process. So you can see from the chart here, we start with the current year, and then we're doing projections on the categories that are shown there, expenses and revenues. What that demonstrated to us at the time is that with a projection on the allowable tax levy limit increase shown at the bottom of 72.3 million, that we had expenses of about 3.2 million, or tax levy increase at that time of about 3.2 million, but given where we were with the tax levy, there's about a $1.6 million difference between those two. So that was our gap. So we were able to conclude that we were likely going to have a gap, and the gap was going to be in the magnitude of about 1.6 million. Some of the factors that are influencing the development of next year's budget, state aid, which Dr. Wiles had mentioned, so foundation aid, which is that basic aid that follows every student. We're looking at a projection, given the governor's executive budget proposal, about $58,000 to support our students. Expense-based aids, we're only projecting about $60,000 for that. We do have some debt rolling off, but you'll see that in the slides, which also means we have aid rolling off as well. So we do get aided on our expenditures related to capital improvement. So they go hand in hand, but very minimal on the state aid side in terms of increases that are projected. In terms of expenditures, if we look at the larger areas, BOCES, private, special education placement and services, reduction there of just over $200,000. Teacher retirement system, we're looking at an increase there of about $578,000. Health insurance is expected to go up about $621,000. Percentage-wise, that's not large, it's less than 4%, but it's a substantial number in our district. Debt payments, we're looking at a reduction, as I mentioned, $520,000 there. In the current year budget, we had money that was allocated, $150,000, to make some improvements to the elevator at the middle school. We used that money this year. We don't need that money again next year, so that's coming out of the budget, and that will be a reduction. And then a transfer to the special aid fund. This goes toward a proposal that's been promulgated by the governor as part of his executive budget proposal, which would change the way that students who attend, special needs students who attend summer programs, get aided. So right now they're aided at 80% of their cost. That will change to what is called a wealth-based measure based on school district criteria. That ratio would go down to 47%. So we would incur an additional cost to educate those children during the summer that's normally been covered by state aid. So again, that's on the expenditure side, $200,000 increase there overall. In terms of the tax levy limit calculation, which we'll walk through shortly, the tax-based growth factor, that added $813,000. So I'll go into that in more detail, but that certainly helps as we look at the tax levy limit calculation and our ability under that formula. And then payment in lieu of taxes, this is new for us this year, or coming into next year. There's a property, Albany Place LLC, that the town IDA granted a pilot payment or payment in lieu of taxes, so we now have to factor that into our tax levy limit calculation. And that's $73,570. A little bit about the executive budget proposal. This is in summary, so you've probably heard that the governor's touting a 3% increase in education. That's $769 million. The categories that are most germane to the school district, our school district, foundation aid and the expense-based aids, those that are the two that say operating aid next to them. That category is about $605 million. The other aids that are listed there, so there's another $164 million on that page we really aren't eligible for. It's higher needs school district in those programs. So really in terms of the governor's proposal and the aid categories that we're looking at, we're in that bucket of having access to about 80% of the overall aid increase. A little bit about the tax levy limit calculation. It's an 8-step formula. It's not something that we can come up with. It's determined by New York State. All schools have to follow the same formula. And basically the premise behind this is that the vast majority of the expenses within our budget are limited to growth of no more than 2%, or it could be less. It happens to in 2018-19 be at the 2% mark, but that's the consumer price index piece of the formula. And basically this whole process of the formula is to determine a threshold at which you either have a 50% approval rating for your budget or a supermajority or 60% that's required. So we're getting to a threshold amount that just tells us up to that amount. If 50% of the voters pass the budget, you're good. If you exceed that amount, you'll need a supermajority or 60% of the voters to have a passed budget. And then again, along with that, under the new legislation that went into effect, is if the budget is ultimately defeated, you can't have any increase at all in your tax levy. So you have to, so the tax levy we have in 2017-18 would have to be the same tax levy we would have in 2018-19 despite increased cost. In terms of the formula itself, I'll give you a couple of the factors that are important in the equation rather than walking through each of the numbers. Really, there's two basic components. The first is that tax-based growth factor that I mentioned before. In this case, it's the 1.0115. It's a small number overall, but it's meaningful, and I showed you that $813,000 that equated to. We're very fortunate in our district to have growth within our town, and this is really related to new construction. So by virtue of having that pretty continuous new construction within our town, we benefit from that under the formula, and we get extra money, tax levy and limit calculation. The other piece with this is you'll see the line labeled taxes levied for exemptions. You'll see it in two parts of the equation. That's really the part that isn't subject to the CPI or the 2%. So this is basically debt that we pay on building projects or the purchase of school buses. So in the formula, you exclude it before you apply the 2%, and then you're able to add it back on in the end. So that's exempt. But outside of that, pretty much all costs within the budget are covered under the 2% or CPI limitation. Down at the bottom, we haven't had a pilot since I've been here, so this is the first time we've had a pilot as part of the formula, payment in lieu of taxes. First year coming on, it's a detriment. You can see it's a deduction leading up to the amount of the tax levy amount. So next year, it won't have that same impact, but in the first year of a pilot coming on, it does cause a reduction in your tax levy limit calculation. So overall, we're looking at a 2.2% increase in our tax levy limit threshold for next year. In terms of the actual budget itself that we've developed so far, we're looking at a budget increase of just over $2.2 million. That would give us a total budget of $100,720,850, or 2.7% increase. We're also not shown there, we're also looking at at this point, a projected tax rate impact of 1.73%. Just to kind of illustrate how the particular costs within the budget are allocated. Again, salaries and benefits are the biggest category, whether it's teachers, whether it's teaching assistants, whether it's bus drivers, bus attendants, administrators. Best way to provide education is still through people, and to take care of children, we need people to do that. So that's the major expense for any school district, is in staffing, and that's 79% of our overall budget. That's followed by debt service, and that's again payment on borrowing for capital improvements as well as buses, 6.8%, followed by contracted services at 6.1%. BOCES services is 5.3%, equipment and supplies 2.2%, and then we have a very small amount for interfund transfers at 0.5%. In terms of the major categories of the budget and what the impact is, you can see from the chart some of the impacts. It's our $2.2 million, how it's spread among salaries, benefits, equipment, and those categories that we just went through. But that just shows you represented here how those costs are allocated at this particular point in time with the proposed budget. And similarly, we'll talk about revenues. Again, large categories. What's the impact in terms of the budget? We've talked about most of these things. I'll point out local sources of revenue. Interest rates earnings are driving most of that increase of $142,000. State aid, those two pieces that we talked about before, come to $117,000, and that's what we're looking at for total state aid improvements at this point in time. And as Dr. Wiles mentioned, appropriated fund balance, when we went through the budget, and Dr. Wiles is going to talk about the changes that were actually made. At the end of the day, between additions and reductions, we still didn't have enough money to stay below our tax levy and limit threshold unless we added some money from our fund balance. So you can see we've added $325,000. We needed that to balance the budget out and make sure we had enough revenue for the expenses that are included in this version of the budget. Our property tax levy is going up about 1.6 million as well. So naturally, that raises the question of how are we doing with our fund balance and reserves if we have to start tapping into them. We had a progression. As you know, we went through a difficult stretch with funding at the state level. Fortunately, we had fund balance and reserves to draw upon at that time. We did end up using them, and over the last couple of years, we've been able to add to them to grow them back up. And again, these are like savings accounts. It's like you having a bank account, someplace to draw upon an emergency situation. You have money set aside, unexpected circumstances. You can continue to provide and meet for your expenses by tapping into the savings that you have. So fund balance is just a general savings account. When we talk about reserves, they're specific. So they have a specific purpose set out by law, and the money can only be used for that specific purpose. An example would be workers' compensation expenses. So we can set up a reserve for workers' compensation expenses, but we can only use that to pay workers' compensation expenses. We can't use it to pay staff salaries, for example. So this is a combination of both the general savings pot of money that we have that's called fund balance, as well as various reserve accounts that we've established over the years. And again, talking a little bit more about the tax levy limit calculation. So where we are with the budget compared to the maximum allowable tax levy limit, you can see we're very tight. We're $6,178 under the tax levy limit threshold with the budget that we're proposing tonight. And in terms of the percentage, the budget's at 2.23%, our maximum is at 2.24%. So we're right at the edge of just staying below the tax levy limit threshold. So this would still require 50% voter approval to have this particular budget pass. A little bit of history around our budget votes. As you can see, over the last several years, our percentage has been climbing in terms of our yes votes. So we appreciate the confidence the voters have placed in us over the past several years, and we've worked hard to develop budgets that the voters can support. You can also see where our tax levy increases have been as well. A little higher, a little lower, depending on how the tax levy limit formula works in any particular year, but we have stayed below the tax levy threshold each and every year, and that's the intention again with next year's budget as well. Okay, now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Wiles to talk a little bit about specific items within the budget.
Okay, we're going to transition now to what I would call decision points in our work thus far. This first slide, I want to just kind of highlight where we are with average class size. And I want to place a caveat on it because averages can be deceiving. I have a colleague who describes an average as your head is in the oven and your feet are in the freezer, but the average number is in between. So these average class size averages are for all sections across the entire district. So they don't necessarily capture the variation of the actual numbers of students in individual classrooms. So it's illustrative, but it may not represent the actual experience of every single classroom across the district. But you get a feel for where we are on average in each of our grade levels. On the far right, we have a couple classrooms that I've placed under the heading of under review. Our class size or numbers of sections that you'll see in the appendices that go along with with your materials are based on our existing class size guidelines, and we actually have a computer model that tells us at which point we add another section. And so in the chart that you see here, we have just simply used those computer models. So if a class is at 24.5, which is a half a child away from our upper guideline, we did not add the section at this point. So those 5 classrooms on the far right are what I'm calling under review, and as enrollment fleshes itself out, as children come and go and new enrollees show up, we'll be able to make some decisions later on in the spring and summer about sections that need to be added. I just want to point out the footnote at the bottom of the screen to say that the budget we're presenting tonight includes 5.0 unassigned FTEs, which gives us that flexibility to address needs should they become those needs later on in the process. So just as a starting point. For the next several slides, we're going to use the organizing structure that we did in our survey materials. So I'm going to share changes to the upcoming spending plan grouped with items grouped in 4 big categories. The first category being areas of known savings, and I guess I should put quotations around known, because as much as we're sure about things, nothing is ever sure, but we're pretty sure savings in that first category. Beneath that are the identified needs that came forward through the budget development process with our administrative team. Up in the upper right-hand column is the category of reductions. And with the exception of very few items, these are all things that, all things considered, our administrative leaders would not want to put forward. There's a couple things that are related to enrollment that we would do anyway, but by and large, these were hard to talk about and to implement. And then we have one other category that I called other opportunities and or changes. And we have a single item that I'll talk about later there. This is an opportunity that came along late in our budget development process, but which has some real merit to it. So I'm going to jump into our decision points, beginning with the known savings. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about each of these, and we'll be here for quite some time. But I do want to hit some of the highlights here. The first item that is a known savings is kind of a turn for us. In past years, we have been increasing our ENL staffing. We're actually seeing a decline in the need with students who are transient and or meeting the benchmark for being proficient in English. So we actually need one less ENL teacher at the high school this year. Second item I referenced earlier today, $181,830 savings for students with disabilities who are exiting out of district placements. That's 8 students who are transitioning to adult support services. I will point out for those of you who have been following the process closely that in the first draft of these proposals, that number was $450,000. It has contracted a bit as we've gotten firmer prices from BOCES about the cost of programs next year. We've had a student who needs to be placed. So this number is why I put the quotation marks around the word known, because there's a lot of variability in that category. And then we also have a projected $100,000 of savings in contracted pupil personnel services, and these are for things like OT and PT and speech for students who are in out-of-district placements that we contract for those services. We also have some other savings in non-instructional kinds of areas, utilities, both in overall and in our transportation area. We have a $20,000 savings from the current budget to next. We are currently in that first phase of architectural services for our proposed capital project. That work will be done in June, so we don't need to include that $20,000 in our budget for next year. And we have some professional development savings in our transportation department, because we're just not going to give up on professional development at all, but we've found some ways to offer it at no cost. So that was my short list of known savings. What is next are the items that are included as additional expenditures for next year that came as identified needs from our principals and program leaders. And the first is actually a savings, but this year we piloted the use of permanent building substitutes. It is working well. It actually is a money saver, so we are going to have another one of those at the high school for next year for a savings of $9,700. We also need to add a section of Italian. We have 52 students in 8th grade coming up to the high school who are going to be taking Italian. We need 2 sections. And we also need to build in a bit of money for necessary supplies for family and consumer science, otherwise known as FACS. At the middle school, we have some need for our math academic intervention services for $13,000. We're also keenly aware of our need to support struggling students. We saw that in our priorities, so there's $2,760 in the budget to restore a program called Strive for Success, which supports at-risk students and their families. And Guilderland Elementary School does need additional E&L teaching support. Their population of students who come to us with English as a new language grows in leaps and bounds. So they will be increasing an FTE, but you'll notice that that is offset by a reduction at FMS. So while this is an addition at Guilderland Elementary School, it is actually a no-cost addition overall. Our needs at FMS have also decreased. It's because our E&L teachers are so exceptional, and they really are terrific. A couple more identified needs. The first here is a CPSE chairperson / school psychologist. That's a 1.0. We have a very high caseload of preschool students with disabilities, and the need to work with those children and those families to place them in our kindergarten is a tremendous time commitment. And currently our elementary instructional administrator for special education does that in addition to her job working with all 5 elementary. It just is too much. So we're pairing that with a school psychologist position because we continue to have need for psychological services at FMS and GHS. So that would make it a 1.0. The high school, we are adding 1.0 special education teachers. This will follow our yearly implementation of co-teaching. Last year we started co-teaching in 9th grade. This year we introduced co-teaching in 10th grade. Next year we'd like to continue in 11th grade. It will actually require 2.0 teachers at the high school to do that, but we will be able to shift some resources from the middle school to meet that need. And then lastly on this slide, we have a 1.0 need for a special education teacher at the elementary level, again to expand our co-teaching work. This next item is $26,000 for .4 physical therapist. This is to transition services that are currently provided through a contracted service to our own employee. That cost is offset, but it is a change. We also have included 5 FTEs for teaching assistants to support students with one-to-one needs and other supports. And lastly on this slide, we've had a lot of conversation about literacy coaching in our district following the presentation by Alicia Rizzo and her team from Linwood. This $5,000 is the start of doing some district-wide professional development around that topic. There will be additional costs. We'll be taking those out of Title II funds. We also have some needs that we cannot ignore around our facilities. The renewal of licenses for our security cameras and cooling tower maintenance. We also have some work to do on our telephone system for $17,000. That will be an item on our capital project. We had much more work to do there, but this will get us through for a bit. And then at Linwood, we need to repair the partition wall in the gymnasium. It is no longer functional, and it does affect our ability to provide instruction within that space. So those were all of the new reductions. The next few slides are the hard part of all of this work, and these are the reductions that have been put forward to help close that gap. There's a couple TA positions. The first one is connected to our high school computer lab. The reality is more and more of our computing happens within classrooms on one-to-one devices. The use of the labs is different. We believe we can support the work of students without having a teaching assistant assigned to that room. We're also removing the TA who does the structured study hall. We have lots of structures in place to support students in the high school who are struggling. while this would be, as I think Mr. Lutzik said to me, nice to have, there are other means that we have to help students who perhaps are struggling. The next one is difficult to share. If you remember our original proposal, we had 2.5 FTEs in reductions of elective courses at the high school. When we got to this point, I asked Mr. Lutzik if he could find 1 FTE rather than the 2.5, and I asked him to work with his team to make recommendations for reductions that would have the least impact on student opportunity. And you have the list there, and when we meet again next Tuesday, we can dive more deeply into these choices. But as you can see, there's a 0.1 in school to work, 0.2 AP computer science, a 0.1 in psychology, it's an elective, 0.2 in studio art, 0.2 in AP language, and 0.2 in our focus coordinator. And we can dive much more deeply into that next week. Other reductions, a lot of our leaders looked for reductions in things like materials, supplies, equipment, because cutting there, while difficult, preserves programming, preserves people. So you'll see a lot of reductions in costs sprinkled out throughout here. I just want to be clear that for almost all of these, administrators and other leaders put forth about twice as much as is listed here. So, for example, I think Mr. Piscatelli had about $25,000 of reductions all told in his line, and we said, we're not going to take all of that, but we do need to take some, so you prioritize. So you see some reductions in materials, supplies, fees, equipment repair. You also see a couple reductions here that are enrollment driven, PE and health at the high school. And lastly, Dutchman Committed is a project that's up and running at the high school. Its goal is to be self-sufficient, and its goal has always been to be self-sufficient. So this current year, the district funded that program at the level of $7,500. Next year, they will get $2,500, and they'll do some work with fundraising. This next item is, I think, something we'll talk a lot about next week when we're together again. This item reduces the number of sections in 8th grade from 16 to 14, and is a savings of 2.4 FTEs. That's half of all of the core areas, a half of an FTE, math, science, English, and social studies, and then bits and pieces of the encore areas. The reality of this reduction is that even though it probably was brought up because of financial reasons, it's actually not a bad thing programming, because the half team that served the other 2 sections was part-time in the building. And for students assigned to that half team, whose teachers were only in the building half of the time, really don't have full access to their teachers for extra help outside of their actual class time. So I know this was a difficult conversation at the middle school, but it actually has some strong supports as a side effect for students. So large savings there, but all teachers will have full-time access to students. I already mentioned the reduction of an FMS ENL teacher. Again, that's driven by need and will be shifted to GES, also for need. Lori Hirschenhart is going to delay some purchases of musical instruments to preserve programming. Her wish list, I think, was $25,000, so we took about half of that. And the last one on this page is delayed work. Our middle school gymnasium floor does need to be refinished. It comes at a pretty significant price tag. We're going to delay that for now. And as you can see here, I won't go through each of these, but at the district level, we've done some reductions as well, line items, and some bit of staffing around records management to help close our revenue gap. And then the last two proposed changes that are savings, as you know, last year we had $35,000 in our maintenance lines in order to do some work on the cobblestone schoolhouse. We have not included any funds this year for work there. It's certain that repairs may be needed, but not necessarily next year when our finances are so tight. And then you can see a bit more savings in that last item there. The last thing I want to talk about, we're really very excited about, and this is an ad to our school community. We have the opportunity in partnership with the BOCES, who is working in partnership with Parsons, to actually have an on-site mental health clinic here in Guilderland to support students and families. We had planned a meeting with Joe Dragoni, who is the administrator at BOCES, who was coordinating all of this for last Friday, and you will all recall last Friday, that meeting did not occur. But we are excited about the prospect of having an individual located in district that we can have as a resource to support some of our most significant mental health needs. And it's a resource not just for our children, but also for their families. So this doesn't replace social workers or our counselors or our school psychologists. This is more of a clinical setting to provide that extra level of support for students who have that need. Again, next week when we're together, I should be able to have more detailed information as we try to reschedule that meeting with Mr. Dragoni. So those are all the changes so far. I do want to talk about, so if things get better, and I do think they will be better. As I mentioned earlier tonight, I was at an advocacy day today, spoke with about a half a dozen different legislators who had measured optimism, I'll put it that way. So I don't think that the state aid that we shared with you tonight is the last word in the resources that are available to us. So what are some things, if we have additional resources, will be at the top of priorities from the administrative level? And the first of those is reading support at Pine Bush and GES. Both Mr. Sanita and Mr. Lockwood put in proposals to increase reading support in their building, and we weren't able to put it in at this time. We will solve that problem. We'll be working on it right through the next few weeks. Another high priority from our perspective is to restore electives that were identified for savings at GHS. I don't know if we can restore all of them, but we would very much like to maintain a high level of opportunity for our students, and that goes right along with the item underneath. We had some really interesting elective ideas proposed. One was American Sign Language. We would absolutely love to offer that, but it's essentially $13,000 per elective. We'd also like to expand some of the time donated to our media program that Mr. Maycock runs. He does that on a shoestring right now. It's growing. We'd like to support it if resources would allow. And then lastly, a really big number, but we have not in this draft of the budget included any money to support technology replacement. And you had a very visceral demonstration of why we need to do some of that work, because our equipment is getting old, it's not reliable, and it does interrupt instruction just like it interrupted our presentation tonight. So should we have some additional resources, we will need to address some technology needs. And I have a little asterisk next to that 187,750 because for months and months and months, we've been talking about Smart Schools money and the expectation that we're getting a lot of resources for technology through Smart School if only they would approve our proposal. These asks are not included in our Smart Schools plan. These are kind of day-to-day general teaching and equipment needs that we have. So more to come on that. And then the last item here is really for the board to contemplate. We used another $325,000 of fund balance. After most of you told us to use as little as possible, but we also did not want to impact students too adversely. So if we have more resources, that might be a discussion that we have later on in the process. I won't spend a bunch of time here, but I wanted to just refresh your memory about the kinds of things that are funded through Smart Schools. It has to do with connectivity, technology equipment, security features that are separate and apart from the list of things that we need to purchase outright on our own. This is the net staffing changes. It's a series of pluses and minuses. What I hope this captures is how hard we wrestle with things that we need very much, balanced by things we still need, but maybe not so urgently. But when all is said, across the entire district, we will be increasing by 4.3 FTEs. And I remind everyone here that we have included 5 FTEs of unassigned teachers. We also have 5 FTEs of unassigned teaching assistants. All right, we're coming to the end. So here's what we attempted to do in putting all of this together. I say this every year because every year it's true, that we put student needs first and we try to think about this over the long run. What can we sustain? We try to listen carefully to our community and reflect the values and priorities that they have, but we're also very mindful of our taxpayers who already spend a lot of money to support us. We get that. We tried to respond to greater financial challenges than we anticipated. During a time of perceived economic growth, this morning Tom DiNapoli spent 10 minutes telling a room full of superintendents that the New York State economy is great. And I'm thinking about our talk with you tonight and how it doesn't feel so great where we're standing. I don't like to be the harbinger of not great news, but we're a little worried about 1920, that this may be another difficult year ahead of us. So we want to be careful and conservative in the decisions that we're making right now. And then last, there still are unknowns in this budget. There are things we're still working through. Health insurance costs still are being fine-tuned. Special education costs through BOCES are still being fine-tuned. BOCES is doing a lot of restructuring, and when they do that kind of work, it trickles down to us, so we'll probably be fine-tuning some things. And then the most obvious unknown is our final state aid allocation and the adoption of the state budget. I heard from Assembly Member Phil Steck today that they anticipate an on-time budget. That would be great, and that would help us in our work in April. Okay, so next steps, we're winding down here, as I've mentioned a few times. March 13th is our formal Q&A. The following week is a regular Board of Education meeting. Always welcome to hear from our community, and questions will always be appreciated. Our budget workshop is on April 10th, and the board is set to adopt the budget on April 17th. It's really late this year, so we'll be on a quick turnaround to get our budget newsletter out. Just a reminder, we meet here at 7 o'clock. We'll be doing some outreach with local organizations and parent groups after the budget is adopted. Formal budget hearing is May 1st, and the budget vote May 15th, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., all 5 elementary schools. And if you need more information, all of this will be on our website. And this next slide is going to say questions. It's going to say questions next week. Unless there is something very unclear that will make it impossible to review the materials so far. Oh, you can mail them in, but we're just not going to do the Q&A now. But absolutely, if you want to mail them in, that helps us think about them. We appreciate that. All right, having said that.
Great. Thank you, Murray.
Sure.
And Neil. So the next item on our agenda is information items, and I guess we will continue with Marie and then move back up.
Okay. Next item is letter C, and that is a review of the proposed 2018-19 school calendar. This draft has now been reviewed by our ad hoc calendar committee for the district and our administrative team. Yesterday I met with the executive committee of the Guilderland Teachers Association, and everyone is happy with this. So I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
When will we find out about half-days?
So the Board of Regents is currently reviewing regulations around the 180-day requirement and how that affects whether or not you can have half-days. Their public comment period was extended from 45 days to 60 days, so it'll probably be the end of March before we have any clarity. This calendar that you will approve next time is well within the 180-day regulation, so there's no question there. And this calendar does not articulate half-days. That happens in the calendar we release in July. So I think we can safely adopt this calendar regardless of what the Board of Regents does. We get lots of calls, when will the calendar be done, so I don't want to wait till April to finish. Sure. Sina?
I forgot I remember hearing about this, but I forgot. So April next year, that break, and then the Monday is off?
Yes.
I forgot why that was done like that.
So the Capital Region BOCES originally did the draft, and in their draft, they had as a day off December 21st, the Friday before the December break. And honestly, I'm not sure why that day would need to be off. But in April, Good Friday falls within the week. Typically, we have the Friday before the week off, so the Friday was subsumed within the week. So we took the day from December and we moved it to the Monday after Easter, so that we would have 6 actual days of break, if that makes sense.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
So we just
shifted it.
We moved it. Any other questions?
Can I just ask about the day after Halloween? I think this year, there may have been, maybe middle school was out that day, but it looks like that's not an issue this year.
Right.
Okay.
So last
For
year,
next- for the
we
next
did our Superintendent's Conference Day on November 1st. There was mixed reviews on that. Elementary loved it, right, Tara? I think middle school loved it too, but we heard from parents in the high school that having the day off after Halloween inspired some less than judicious decision-making on the part of our older students. How is that for? So we have, it didn't work this year either because of Election Day being on the 6th too. We'll be out of session for our students on the 6th. So we'll have our conference day and our parent-teachers conference days on the Election Day. Keep going. All right, so we heard from our high school student representative that our high school will be participating in the National School Walkout Day. The Student Council met today with Mr. Lutzik, and they have a plan, and I'm happy to share the plan as we know it. We'll be doing some communication around this very shortly. But the plan is for students at about 10 of 10 to walk out of the building. If they choose, this is voluntary, they'll walk to the front of the building. They'll spend 17 minutes outside and release 1 balloon for each of the victims of the Parkland shooting tragedy. They'll read the name, release the balloon, have a moment of silence, and do that 17 times. and then they will come back in the building. So, as I mentioned, this is voluntary. If there are students who don't wish to participate, their classes will continue. Teachers will stay right with them. If a class, the entire class goes out front, then the teacher can go as well. We have been working with the Guilderland Police Department to make sure that this is a safe environment. They'll be closing off School Road during the time of this event. We'll communicate about that a lot in case parents are trying to come and go to pick up children or something from the high school. I think that's essentially the plan. But we have been working with the police. We have it structured so I think it'll be minimally disruptive, but highly meaningful for the students who wish to participate.
Will there be enough teachers or enough supervisors of the students who are outside because if the teachers are in the classroom?
It will be a matter of all hands on deck, so I think we should be fine. I don't know.
Amy volunteered all of you earlier.
I signed us up.
Perfect.
Marie, do we have any idea of how many students are thinking of participating or wanting to?
Tom, did you hear that? The numbers of students who might be participating?
We have no idea.
I have had a couple emails from parents wanting to know about elementary buildings. They will not be participating. This is a student-led activity. It is not a teacher-led or administrator-led or district-led. So we don't see students at that level, leading that. Plus, I hope and I suspect that many of our elementary students don't know what happened in Parkland. And so it would be very confusing. The middle school, Mr. Lester isn't able to be here today, but I don't think they have a number of students who are interested, but we will follow up with that because that question has come up.
And this was started by the students wanting to be part of this.
This was all student council, and I have heard nothing but the highest regard for the level of responsibility, their respect, their willingness to work with their faculty advisors, with the administration, to be mindful of the different points of views that can be connected to this conversation. This is about school safety and about remembering individuals who were victims of a terrible event. So really very impressive young people. Well, I have a lot tonight. So, next, we are gearing up to hire our next Guilderland High School principal. Mr. Letzik, as you know, is retiring after 7 years of very dedicated service to the district. The posting closed Friday, March 2nd. When I wrote this, we had 41 applications, but we actually ended up with 46 applications. The screening team met yesterday and reviewed those applications. We've narrowed down the pool for round 1, which will occur Monday, March 12th and Tuesday, March 13th, beginning about 4 o'clock. And Christine is the board's representative in that process. So we will interview 2 groups on Monday and Tuesday. On the 13th, prior to the board meeting, we'll narrow down to a group of finalists who will come back March 20th for round 2. We are hoping to have the process complete and an appointment by the board on April 17th so we can begin some transition and whoever it is can be ready to roll on July 1st. So, a lot of work ahead of us. What else do I have? Let me go down one here. Just a quick reminder, we are in March, which means we're in musical season. This weekend is the musical at the middle school, and they are putting on Oliver, beginning Friday night, March 9th through Sunday, March 11th. Friday and Saturday, the performances will take place at 7. Sunday performances at 2. Tickets are $9 at the door, $8 by pre-sale, and you can email your reservation at fmsmask@guilderlandschools.net. And then the following weekend, we have the Guilderland Players at the high school putting on the Music Man, and that's March 15, 16, 17 at 7 p.m. Sunday, March 18th at 2. Ticket prices range from $5 to $10, depending on seating. And the notable thing about this production is for the first time it includes elementary students who are participating in the actual production. They have been coming here to rehearse right along, and we're very anxious to see what they do. So my last item is a terribly sad item, and my screen just left me, so I'll just talk. As you know, last week was just a terrible week in the high school. We lost a long-time beloved math teacher, Mr. Warren Bollinger. He passed away at home over the break from a heart attack, and no one knew until Monday, so it was just a devastating and heartbreaking day, very difficult for everybody. A lot of people, Mr. Piscatelli, Mr. Ludsick, the whole high school team were just amazing in trying to support their teachers and faculty, and I'm going to forget people who I should recognize, but the high school met in this room at the end of the day, and if you want to be proud of a group of people who pulled together, that was it. So we met, Mr. and Mrs. Bollinger came to the DO, I want to say on Wednesday, and we had a chance to offer our condolences directly. They published a beautiful obituary for Warren. I sent it to you. You should click on it and hear the music. It's very nice. The Bollingers are hosting a memorial service at Malozzi's on March 24th at 7 o'clock, and everyone is invited, students, parents, whole school community. They're going to welcome prepared comments at 8 o'clock, so if anyone is available to go, it would be great. Here in the high school, we're also having a memorial service, and that will be on Friday the 23rd, right after school in the auditorium. Mr. Maycock is putting together a video and some poems, and I'm sure it'll be just lovely. Nothing prepares you for that. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Marie.
Sure.
Next, we will move to Damien, curriculum and instruction.
All right, thanks very much. Andy Maycock was mentioned earlier, and we'd like to extend congratulations to him and his team of students who keep us up to date with the Guilderland High School Reporter. Under the old morning news models, where a show was aired every other day, this wasn't even mathematically possible, but on Wednesday, February 28th, the 100th episode of the 2017-18 Reporter was broadcasted. Not only did they reach 100 broadcasts, but they are also proud to say that those were 100 consecutive broadcasts. So we're very proud of the students who come in early every day to work in the news, and of Ethan Skelly and Hayden Elmore, who use their free blocks to tape movie reviews. And of course, they keep us up and running here as well for our board meetings. So thank you to Mr. Maycock and his team. My next item, we have more congratulations to extend. We have a physical education teacher who has been named Teacher of the Year. So congratulations to Guilderland High School physical education teacher Allison Relier, who was named the Secondary Physical Education Teacher of the Year by the Capital Zone of New York State's Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. And I'll just share with you a couple of quick quotes from the Teacher Professional of the Year Committee. Allison, you go above and beyond to provide your students with a quality physical education experience. Your work ethic and dedication to your profession inspire colleagues around you. The school community you have embraced is benefiting from your commitment to all students, whether they are at risk or facing physical or social challenges. As a role model, your enthusiasm and high expectations for yourself and others is respected. Your list of contributions and accomplishments go on and on. Your willingness to go above and beyond is most noteworthy in your letters of recommendation. So Allison's award will be presented at the Capital Zone Conference held at Russell Sage College on Friday, March 9th, 2018. And again, we want to extend well-deserved congratulations on being selected as our Capital Zone Secondary Physical Education Teacher of the Year. So congratulations, Allison. And I'm also pleased to report some other good news. The Guilderland Central School District is proud to announce that Farnsworth Middle School was recently redesignated for the second time as an Essential Elements School to Watch by the New York State Education Department and the Essential Elements Schools to Watch leadership team. Farnsworth was first recognized as a school to watch in March of 2011. This prestigious designation recognizes the middle school's continued commitment to enhancing school programs and practices. Farnsworth is one of only 30 schools from throughout New York to currently be named a school to watch. And of course, congratulations to Mr. Laster, his team, the teachers, the students, for a well-deserved recognition as well. My next item, assuming technology actually works, is a bit of a video sharing. As many of you know, this is our first year in our new elementary enrichment program, which we affectionately call C Cubed, which stands for Curiosity, Creativity, and Collaboration. So we have two wonderful teachers who we've hired this year who I think have done an amazing job in not only becoming familiar and comfortable with our elementary programs, but also spreading themselves miraculously across 5 buildings. So we have a link to share with you. This was produced by Jackie Vandenberg, who is a 5th grade classroom teacher at Linwood Elementary School, and it highlights some of the work that these two teachers have been doing with really all of our students across the 5 buildings. So I'm going to ask my lovely assistant, Mr. Lockwood, if you could hit play. Okay, I think we've had enough technology for tonight. Anyway, the link is there for you to watch in your own time, and I definitely...
We work with all 2,500 students in the elementary school. Hi, I'm Victoria Winoker, and this is my partner, Ben Rudolph, and we are the C-Cube team. We work across the district in all 5 elementary schools, in every single classroom. We go in kindergarten through 5th grade, and we push into all of the rooms, so we work with all 2,500 students in the elementary school district. Our main objective, our goal for the C Cubed, is to work with your children, our children, on curiosity, collaboration, and creativity. We love what we do every day.
My favorite part of C Cubed is when I use collaboration with my classmates to solve problems. My favorite part of C Cubed is when we use Legos to build structures. My favorite part of C Cubed is coding the Ozobots.
My favorite part about C Cubed was making the marshmallow apples.
One of the best things about the C Cubed program is that it allows students to take curriculum already being studied in the classroom and apply STEM principles to that curriculum to really make it come alive.
The 5th grade and C Cube collaborated to create a STEM project that highlights our study of westward expansion using Ozobots and Lego creation. Incorporating hands-on activities allowed our students to gain a deeper understanding of history. Students were able to learn how to use Ozobots and the significance of the westward expansion simultaneously.
The task for this project was to create a living timeline of important events from the westward expansion period. Each group had to make a timeline and choose 4 topics to highlight. The Ozobot was programmed to travel on the timeline and stop at each of these events. We used Legos to make a structure to represent the event, and created a quick overview of what the event was and why it was important.
One of the challenges for this project was making sure your codes worked 100% every time.
Sometimes the robot would read the code perfectly, but other times it would go off track. To fix this problem, I built a bumper with Lego to force him back on the path. One of my favorite parts of this project was using Legos to build structures. I built a horse to represent the horses that were given to Lewis and Clark by the Shoshone tribe.
Curiosity, collaboration, and creativity. Definitely exemplified in the project that my students just had an opportunity to experience. They could take their thinking anywhere they wanted to, and without this opportunity, they just simply wouldn't have had this experience. My students were able to take technology, take content, piece it together in a way that was genuine and authentic to themselves.
Curiosity, collaboration, creativity.
Mr. Lockwood. So just a little snapshot for you to think about. We obviously are in our first year with our new enrichment teachers, and I cannot say enough about the work they have done thus far, and I'm very much looking forward to the next iteration of the program as well. My next item, we want to extend a little more congratulations to Farnsworth Middle School teacher Jamie Mullins, who applied to participate in the Google Expeditions beta program, and she has been accepted. Since Google launched Expeditions in 2015, and I believe some of our board members have seen this in action, one of their top requests from teachers and students was to have the ability to create their own expeditions. And through this beta, Google will loan our school equipment to give us the access to the tools to create and view our own expeditions. So I know Ms. Mullins is eagerly awaiting the arrival of the equipment. And my final item tonight, some news and updates from our music department. This month is Music in Our Schools month for the Guilderland Central School District. We have a month full of events demonstrating excellence in music education. We have music performances which will be held all month long at the Empire State Plaza on the South Concourse, the Farnsworth Middle School Vocal Thunder under the direction of Mrs. Nancy Casalini, and the FMS Chamber Strings will perform on Tuesday, March 13th at 11:30 a.m. And the FMS Select Band under the direction of Mrs. Alexa Ziamek, and the FMS Jazz Ensemble under the direction of Mr. Jason Utter will perform on Thursday, March 15th at 11:30. The Guilderland High School Chamber Choir under the direction of Mrs. Regine Teeter, and the Men's Choir, under the direction of Mrs. Claudia Golub will perform on Monday, March 26th at 11:30 a.m. These concerts are free, they're open to the public, and they serve to impart the importance of providing a comprehensive music education program. March 22nd is the annual cabaret at Farnsworth Middle School beginning at 7:30 p.m. featuring the jazz and stage bands and from the middle and high schools. Students demonstrate their creativity through improvisation, the instantaneous creation of music in the moment. The FMS Select Choir joins the Capital District Youth Choral for the Choral Festival at Troy Music Hall on Sunday, March 18th at 3 p.m. March also features the student theatrical productions, with Farnsworth Middle School's Mask presenting Oliver from March 9th through 11th, and the high school Guilderland Players presenting The Music Man from March 15th through 18th. Other events in March, it's a busy month, include the third grade instrument night on March 20th for parents and students to explore instrumental programs beginning in fourth grade, and the student composer night on March 27th, where composers of any age are invited to present and perform their original compositions. Both of these events will be held at Farnsworth Middle School beginning at 7 p.m. The last week of March begins the elementary spring concerts featuring band, chorus, and orchestra students at Linwood Elementary on March 26th and Pine Bush and Westmere on March 28th. All elementary concerts will begin at 7 p.m. Music in Our Schools Month is a nationwide event saluting excellence in music education. The National Association for Music Education sponsors this annual event, which focuses national attention on the importance of music in our schools. And as you can see, our department has planned many activities in the coming month, and we hope you can attend some.
Thank you, Damien. And now we move to school business information. Neil?
Yes, this evening we've touched several times on school safety and security. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with the community the efforts that we've taken to keep our buildings as safe and secure as possible and our ongoing efforts in regard to that as well. Gilliland Central School District has always placed our highest level of priority on safety and security of our buildings. In light of heightened concerns about safety following the recent tragedy in Parkland, Florida, we want to take this opportunity to share with our community the variety of measures the school district has taken in recent years to enhance the security of our schools. While the list of specific physical security measures is extensive, the majority of our efforts focus on building a stronger school community through communication, respect, and responsibility. We work hard to foster an environment where all are comfortable to say something if they see or hear something. Each day, we use a variety of systems to keep our students safe. There's just a single entrance open in each building throughout the day. All other doors are locked. When visitors arrive, they enter through a controlled double point of entry system, which is staffed during normal school hours. These entryways have security film, prevent shattering, and a panic button to lock doors even if they're programmed to be open. Visitors receive photo ID badges they are required to wear throughout their stay, and their names are checked against a national sex offender database. Inside of our buildings, the district recently installed intruder cores on doors so that every occupied space can be secured from the inside. This physical security is enhanced by the relationship we maintain with our local first responders. First and foremost is a school resource officer with the Guilderland Police Department who is stationed at the high school. The school resource officer is not only a visible presence at the school, but serves as an important liaison between the school district and first responders, as well as a valued resource for improving and enhancing the district's security protocols and response. Throughout the district, there's a network of 256 cameras which can be linked with the Guilderland Police Department or Albany County Sheriff's Office. In the event of an emergency, both police forces have access to view what is happening in our buildings in real time. Also, we have shared extensive and detailed information with first responders about our facilities. They know our buildings well and can access them easily since each Guilderland police car carries a key and swipe card to enter. To further assist our first responders, we have labeled every entrance to an labeled every entrance to each of our buildings so they know precisely which entrance to use to respond to an emergency. Law enforcement agencies have used our high school to conduct joint training exercises during unoccupied times. Finally, our district-wide Safety and Security Oversight Committee meets annually with first responders to review our safety plans and discuss important and timely topics. Building and district-wide safety committees also meet regularly to address issues and concerns and plan training and safety drills. The Guilderland Police Department regularly participates in and supports our drills and other safety-related activities. Beyond those relationships, we know that the best security comes from within. That is why we perform regular announced and unannounced lockdown and shelter-in-place drills with all faculty, staff, and students. Safety teams in all buildings and the district office participate in annual tabletop drills and then debrief to address concerns that are identified as part of the drill. In our two largest buildings, Farnsworth Middle School and Guilderland High School, we employ monitors to oversee the hallways, parking lots, cafeterias, and other spaces where students and others congregate. The district has also developed an extensive emergency preparedness procedures that are available to all faculty and staff. An expanded version of those procedures is available for administrators in a flip chart binder and smartphone app. In addition, all new employees, including teachers, are fingerprinted before they are hired, and extensive background checks are done by the State Education Department and the FBI. While in school, all staff members are required to wear an identification badge at all times. But even with these measures, we know that we can always do more, and we are considering further security upgrades as part of an upcoming capital project. As always, if you have questions or concerns about your child's safety, please do not hesitate to call your building principal or the superintendent's office. Together we will work to ensure that our students are safe and secure while getting a rich, fulfilling education. And that statement is available to the community. It's on our website for anybody to access at their convenience.
Thank you, Neil. Are there any questions or comments for Neil? Okay. Next, we move to Board President information items, of which there are 3 this evening. The first relates to the upcoming Board of Education election, which is scheduled for May 15th, 2018. Petitions are available through the district clerk for any district resident who might be considering running for the Board of Education. There are 3 seats. There are 3 3-year terms on the board that expire June 30th, 2018, and 1 2-year term that expires on May 15th, 2018. In order to be eligible to run for the Board of Education, nominating petitions with 53 or more signatures from qualified voters in the district must be submitted to the district clerk on or before Monday, April 16th, 2018 at 5 p.m. Anyone who has questions about the duties and responsibilities of a board member may contact the superintendent, board president, or any current member of the Board of Education. A candidate must be able to read and write, be at least 18 years of age, a qualified voter, and a district resident for at least 1 year prior to the date of the vote on Tuesday, May 15th, 2018. Candidates do not run for a specific seat on the board. If there are more than 4 candidates running, the individuals with the 4 highest vote totals are elected. The candidate elected with the lowest total votes serves for the 2-year term of office and will begin their term on May 16th, 2018. Further qualifications and information is in the packet available through the district clerk. Any questions? Okay. The next item relates to the Capital Region BOCES Board nominations. The BOCES Board is looking to fill 3 seats that are open for election on April 25th, 2018. These are 3-year terms, 2 of which have been typically held by an Albany County resident, and 1 that, in keeping with practice, will go to a Schenectady County resident. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay. And now we move to the Capital Region BOCES annual meeting, which is scheduled for April 11th, 2018. Reservations to attend this meeting are due by noon on Tuesday, March 20th, 2018. If board members are interested in attending, please let Board Clerk Linda Livingston know. For your information, the date of Wednesday, April 25th, 2018, at our special board meeting that takes place at 8 a.m. is the date selected to vote on the 2018-19 Board of Cooperative Educational Services budget and election. And now we move down to action items. School business management. Neil?
Thank you, Christine. First item this evening is an internal audit report and corrective action plan. As part of the law, school districts have to have an internal audit function, so we've requested our 3 BOCES to do that. Each year they come in and do a financial risk assessment, and they also have to do what's termed a special area audit. So we look at a particular area of the financial area within the school district, and they will go through and audit that, make recommendations, and if they make a recommendation, we have to provide a corrective action plan associated with it. So yes, this year the audit committee decided to have the auditor look at how employees access our financial system software. And it's really done at 2 levels. There's a password and login password that's needed to access the financial application, or access the server at BOCES where the financial application is stored. If access is granted to BOCES, then there still is another login and password that must be supplied to get to the application. Within the financial application, there are a series of modules, if you will, purchasing, payroll, human resources, etc. And users are granted access not only to modules, but within each module, individual screens and reports, and within each individual screen, you have the ability to be granted access to add, change, print, delete, or view. So there's a lot of security measures in place to control access to the financial application itself, and then once within the financial application to certain portions of it. The audit went through and did recommend, made 5 recommendations about improving access. They were reviewed by the audit committee. We've provided the corrective action plan, which was also reviewed with the audit committee. Obviously, there's an opportunity here. We took this as a learning opportunity to make sure that we can improve our procedures relative to granting access to the financial system. The Office of the State Controller has been doing similar audits about granting access to technology and information. So we wanted to get ahead of the curve, make sure our procedures were sound. If there were improvements that we could make, we would like to make them, and make sure we're offering the best protection as possible for our data applications. So I can address any questions at this time. If anybody has specific questions.
No questions? Okay. May I have a motion to accept the internal audit report and corrective action plan? Judy, second Teresa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Next item is a resolution for cooperative bidding. This is a resolution that will allow us to participate with the Niskayuna Central School District in the purchase of foods and other cafeteria supply items. It's the first time we've done this particular joint bid with Niskayuna, but as I mentioned previously, our food service director is currently helping them out. Well, they don't have a food service director, so it creates another opportunity for two schools to get together. We've checked with vendors, and despite our geographic location differences, all the vendors serve the same area, and we're assured by doing this that we could get better pricing by combining our needs across both districts and doing the cooperative bid in this manner. So you have a resolution before you for approval for that.
May I have a motion to approve the resolution for cooperative bidding? Alan, second Kathy. Are there any questions or comments? Alan?
Is there opportunity to do it with other districts, like maybe Voorheesville, Bethlehem, et cetera?
Certainly opens up the opportunity to do that, and I think that's an opportunity that we'll continue to explore going forward.
Does BOCES have any such program that everybody could partake in and enjoy the benefit, since it's a capital area region?
They do, and they do offer competitive or cooperative bidding opportunities. The bigger you make it, sometimes the more difficult it is, because everybody has their certain items that they want and delivery options and so on and so forth. So sometimes we found that it's not always in our best interest, particularly for those that are in remote areas. All schools have the opportunity to join, so if delivery issues arise with more remote areas, things like that, you're all in the same pool at that time, so it can work both ways. You have to do it carefully, but certainly Voorheesville opens a great opportunity, South Colony, Bethlehem, other area schools. So certainly think this is our first foray, and we'll see how it goes, and if it goes well, we'll continue to work to expand the number of schools participating.
Is there any opportunity to do something what they call just-in-time, where what would happen is the vendors would supply the inventory, and as you consume it, you would get billed for it? And if they did that with everybody, that would be, you'd get bulk pricing for people that use like items?
Anything's a possibility, so we can explore that as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes 9-0.
Next we have emergency, make sure we have the agenda, all right, okay. Emergency preparedness sheltering agreements. We have a number of agreements for our students to either go to an alternative location as a shelter site or have another entity use our district as a shelter site. So the agreements are with St. Madeleine Sophie, Capital District YMCA here in Guilderland, the Town of Guilderland, St. Lucy's Parish, Westmere Fire Department, and Christ the King. Give a lot of credit to Tim Murphy, who's our BOCES Health and Safety representative. He works closely with our building principals and with the district in putting these agreements in place and finding suitable relocation sites in the event that we need to bring students to another location. What we found recently, and Alan Lockwood's here, he brought this up, is that we have a plan for busing students to alternative locations, but not always walking. And so depending on the circumstance, can we get buses there? Do we have them available? We have anywhere from 350 to 500 students and staff that might have to be moved in a short period of time or in inclement weather, that we need to have a contingency plan for that. And are there places that, if need be, we could have students walk to and be sheltered? So The new agreements, the Gillen YMCA actually is for Gillen Elementary, is a walking location. It would require a lot of resources from the town to make sure that happens safely, but we've talked to them about it, and if need be, we could get children across the road over to the Gillen YMCA. Same thing with Westmere Fire Department. If we had to evacuate Westmere to a nearby location, what's big enough to house all those students, fire departments there and accessible. Again, we need a lot of cooperation from local first responders to have that work. And then Christ the King we use for the middle school, St. Madeline Sophie for Pine Bush. Town of Guilderland is for Linwood. We haven't had another walking location for that. That's the nearest one we could come up with, and the town's willing to help us out with that. So we're very pleased to be able to have these agreements in place to give us another option for sheltering students and staff in an emergency.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the emergency preparedness sheltering agreements? Teresa, second. Judy? Are there any questions or comments for Neil? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0.
Next, we have two agreements for students that require services. One's with Crossroads Center for Children, and the other is with Arms Acres.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the service agreements? Seema, second. Judy? Any questions or comments on these two agreements? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0.
Next is an internship agreement with Touro College for your approval.
May I have a motion to approve the internship agreement? Alan, second. Tim? Are there questions or comments? Yes.
Question
Sure.
regarding the internship. Neil, can you give us any information as to who partakes in the internship and what the program is really about?
They vary. I don't have a lot to do with the placement of the interns, so I
Okay.
basically work on making sure the agreement meets all the requirements, and we run them by our attorney. I'm trying to think if...
I read it over, but I didn't really know what it...
I'm not sure what this particular college is what area they're looking to place the student in.
It's the Graduate School of Education. I do believe it's student teaching.
That's what it looks like.
So we have a process by which we set up agreements prior to having student teachers assigned here. So this goes through Lynn Severance's office. And essentially, we probably have had some inquiries from the college about placing students here. And this would be the first step to open the door for that to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0.
Next is an extension of the external auditor agreement with Weston Company CPAs. The board, 3 years ago, the board approved Weston Company, and the way the agreement was structured, it was for a 3-year term with an option to extend for an additional 2 years, if mutually agreeable to both Weston Company and the school district. We've reached the end of the initial 3-year term, so we're at the point where we need to make a decision on the remaining 2 years. We spoke with the audit committee, and everybody's in agreement that we would like to continue with Weston Company. We contacted Weston Company. They're willing to continue to work with us for the remaining 2 years as well. So this agreement would extend them for the additional 2 years. And they're holding their price for the 5th year to be the same as the 4th year, so it's even a discount from what we had originally agreed.
Thank you, Alan.
Sure.
May I have a motion to approve the extension of the external auditor agreement? Alan, second. Teresa? Are there any questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0.
And then finally this evening, we have a transportation bid. A little bit unusual. We advertised for a bid. We received bids from 2 vendors. It's related to a homeless situation, transporting children who are homeless. At this point in time, we no longer need the services, and we found that out after we had issued the bid. But by law, once we send out a bid, the board has to act upon the bid. So we did receive 2 bids. The recommendation is that we do not award this bid, and that's the recommendation for this evening.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the resolution? Alan, second Seema. Are there questions or comments? All those in,
Excuse me, we're bidding not to approve it.
Recommendation is not to award the bid.
all those,
So if we happen to, 2 days from now, get a student that's homeless, we'll have to go back out to bid again?
Yes, we would. Unlikely it would be in the exact same location anyway.
Okay.
But yes, once we accept the bid, we have to the board has to take official action on the bid.
Is there any reason why we couldn't accept a bid and not utilize the services, or does accepting the bid cause us to incur a cost and pay for that cost?
Yes, if we accepted the bid, we're obligated then to pay the vendor for initiating the service and providing the service.
Well, it makes sense not to approve it. All right, thank you.
any other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0. Thank you, Neil. And now we move to Board President action items. And for approval this evening are several policies, including the entrance age policy, the student suspension regulation, the school district compliance and copyright law policy, as well as the accompanying regulation. Does anybody want to talk about any of these policies or separate any from the others? Judy?
I think we ought to at least have one brief talk about the entrance age, since there was so much discussion about it, and maybe we could separate that one and vote on the other.
Okay. Separate out the entrance age policy? Okay. So let's work on that one first. If I can have a motion to approve the entrance age policy as written tonight. Kathy, second Alan. Okay. Who would like to start the discussion? Judy?
Well, I'd like to say I listen to the parents, and I appreciate what the parents are saying, and I know it doesn't involve many children, but I think it was Tim who mentioned that perhaps it would be better if we moved it back. I would like to see it September 1st so that all students would be 5 when they entered kindergarten. And that's why I will be voting no on that part.
Okay. Kathy?
Well, I was thinking that when parents make a determination that their child's not ready for kindergarten, that's accepted as a parental decision about their child, and the school doesn't interfere with that. And I think the same thing should be true of parents who decide that their children are ready for kindergarten early, or earlier than the deadline. I mean, I don't really see how, and I know there's a lot of hoops to jump through in this policy, and I guess we have to have that, but I don't really see why one parent's determination is completely uninterfered with, and another parent's determination is regarded with great skepticism. So, I'm in favor of allowing at least some leeway here.
Okay. Would anybody else like to weigh in again? I know we had a lengthy discussion about this last time, so.
Christine?
Yes, Barbara.
Christine?
Barbara, yes?
Oh, good. You can't hear me. Fantastic. I was just reflecting on the mission statement that Marie just shared with us. It says, we want all children to achieve to their highest potential. And I think this particular policy would certainly lend itself to that. These children would have to go through a rigorous screening.
Barbara, you're breaking up.
Yes. Are you having difficulty hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you heard anything?
Yes.
We heard you talk about the mission statement. We like that.
Okay, what I was just trying to say, and I don't know if I'm coming through any clearer now, that I just really would like to have all the kids have an opportunity to fly. We did compromise from the Shen policy as a policy committee by the range from April. We brought it back to January. So again, I would just encourage everyone to each individual child. I think Kathy's point whereby parents can hold their children back, but if their child is ready, and even have the validity of their preschool teachers and social workers and all that are saying that their child is ready, why we would, throw a monkey wrench into that is sort of beyond me. So I continue my support for try this early entrance.
Okay, thank you, Barb. Anyone else?
I just had a question that I forgot, and I was rereading this. I thought I had read something a couple days ago regarding the entrance age policy that we have. If a child doesn't meet our criteria, but a private school allows them to go to kindergarten at the age of 4, when they matriculate into our school for first grade, would they be accepted as a first grader or as a kindergartner?
Yes.
So the real difference is that we are making parents pay for private schooling for kindergarten, basically. If you can go elsewhere and then have your child come in as a first grader next year. Kind of makes my decision a little bit worse because I kind of feel like you're basically just taking that out of the hands of the kindergarten teacher to have to deal with a 4-year-old instead. Now the first grader has to deal with a 5-year-old versus a 6-year-old.
I would also like to say in this policy, and I think Gloria mentioned it maybe in something that was written, that where it says January 31st of the year for which that isn't very clear. That sounds like the wrong year. January 31st, it has to be 5 by January 31st of the year for which the child is seeking to come to
Make it clear that it has to be January 31st of the year that they're enrolled.
Would be in kindergarten. Yeah, I just think the wording on that.
I think we changed it to clarify.
Okay, when I read it, whenever it came through.
Gloria picked that up.
Yeah, Gloria had said it, but I thought it read the same way as what she said. This doesn't make sense, so if that could be checked, if this passes.
It looks like it's good.
I don't have it in front of me, so.
Okay.
Christine, if everybody else has spoken, can I just say one more thing?
Sure. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, I didn't want to. The fact that Teresa, I think, just brought up that a parent can send their child to kindergarten unscreened at a private school and then come into our system as a first grader. It just doesn't, to me, make any sense that the parent has to pay a full year's tuition and then we don't have any testing. That child automatically goes to first grade. I think what we've proposed is the best of both worlds and gives the kids this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else?
I just want to have a point of clarity. So what we're doing is we're changing the policy from our current policy of December 1st to essentially to January 31st. And if they're 5 by January 31st and they run through some testing and the teachers and the tests and the psychologists all come back with a green light, then it's still at the discretion of the superintendent to let them come to school in the fall, to go to school that fall. There was just a lot of words there, and it just seemed like it was very confusing. That's what it seemed to me.
Well, there would be a committee that Dr. Singleton would facilitate that would review. So I don't think ultimately they send me their proposal. I don't think I decide in the end. I think it goes to the committee who reviews the data and makes a decision.
But the policy is still stating that December 1st is the actual cutoff. They're just allowing for parents who want to have their child.
Yes.
Well, then why does it say the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent of schools to establish any and all rules, regulations, procedures necessary to implement the policy and maintain the policy? To me, maintaining it to me would be, you're also the person that has, the buck stops there, whether, if there's a disagreement on whether the kid can or cannot go to kindergarten.
I think the language changes that we've added to this policy that describe kind of the rules by which a child would be, accepted into kindergarten, that is my role. So when I worked with the committee to revise the wording that you have before you, that's what you've authorized me to do.
Okay. That was a little confusing to me. I won't say it was unclear, but I didn't see that in that wording, okay? You've explained it, so I'm fine with it, okay?
Okay.
So what is the significance of December 1st versus January 31st then?
60 days, essentially. I mean, that's...
So the new cutoff is January 31st, not December 1st then?
No, it's still for the vast majority of children, it will be December 1st. But if there are families who believe that their child who is has a birthday December 2nd through January 31st is in fact ready to start kindergarten, there is a process by which the school district requires them to demonstrate that readiness. And that demonstration includes the cognitive testing and all of the things that are listed in this policy.
Again, it just seems confusing that you got two dates, and in my mind, they conflict with each other.
Well, the point of this is it's a waiver to the policy. So for the vast majority of students, the date is still December 1st. But for those children born in that window whose parents believe that they're ready to go, we need to work through a process to gather data that would support that.
Okay, on the flip side, though, like Kathy said, why don't we have a similar process for someone who's, if I choose not to send my kid? To me, it's a parental choice. I mean, you get to send your kid or you don't get to send your kid, one. But the other part of it, too, I understand the testing and all that, but again, there's no test on the flip side. And the other thing that doesn't, to me, sound all that consistent is if I am denied by you or by the school district to send my kid to kindergarten, and I so choose to go to a private school and send them to kindergarten, they pass kindergarten there, and then they get to come to school the next year as a first grader. That is very inconsistent, and it doesn't make sense to me. It's illogical.
On the flip side, the compulsory age in New York State is 6. So we can't compel a family to send their child to school until they are age 6. That's why we don't have the flip side of the argument on the other side. If their compulsory age were 5, we may be having a different conversation.
But what about the first grade thing? Because again, I look at it as the school district says, no, your son is not ready for kindergarten. So I say, I disagree with that. I'm going to go to a private school. Private school, I pay for them. They go through the same program that every other school does. And that person successfully passes that and moves on to first grade. Now, when he comes to school the following year, he's automatically admitted as a first grader, and there's no questions asked. But we made all this ritual about going to kindergarten. Like I said, it's illogical.
I'm not arguing that, but that is the reality. I don't know, and maybe someone else can weigh in here, whether or not a student who did that would automatically go to first grade. I don't know if there have been circumstances where a youngster would I'm looking at Damien, maybe you recall.
I can't recall any circumstances when that happened.
Rice might know. It'd be rare.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a rare circumstance to begin with. But
yes.
the other piece that I'll chime in, I don't know if I can just say this quickly, and I think I would speak for the kindergarten teachers and in our district, that there is a significant difference between a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I think that's a lot. That's where much of the work that the committee did and many of the recommendations that you've read from our staff largely fall.
But my question to that would be, as a counter argument, there's probably an equal or similar difference between a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old.
There is, but there's also the idea of school readiness and preparedness, and experience in a school setting is very important. And when you have children who are coming, some with an experience in a school setting, some without, they generally don't come with the behaviors and the dispositions that are going to allow them to find success. And I think that's a lot of the rationale that many of our kindergarten staff have expressed. Agree with it, disagree with it, I just wanted to
I hear what you're saying. Like I said, the whole thing is illogical to me.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is after a child has gone to school for a year, in a private school, by definition, they will have improved their school readiness because they've spent 10 months now in school.
One would hope.
But we've also mandated that they go elsewhere for that kindergarten education to be ready for first grade. I don't know why. I must have just assumed maybe that if they were 4 and went elsewhere for kindergarten and they came to our district in September, that they would have then repeated kindergarten again, because that's our policy, is that you have to be of this age by this date in order to come to kindergarten. That's my only, in all honesty, of that policy, that's setting alarms, because I kind of feel like you're making parents go to private school for that year versus being matriculated in their district. And maybe they wouldn't even, going through this whole policy of the rigmarole of testing, and then us saying to them, because that's basically it, we're basically saying, we've tested your child, no, we can't take them, and they then would go elsewhere for private schooling, that, okay, we'll see you in September as a first grader, but we won't take you here. I think I'm thinking out loud.
See, but when you make that argument, I sit back and say, what's the purpose of public schools? That's why I think it's so illogical. The purpose of public school is to offer school to children. And if our mission statement also says that we are here to offer and teach kids, I'm having a hard time with why we would turn someone down if they're ready.
Well, that's the issue.
We're not turning them if they're ready. That's the point of the policy.
But even who's to say we would know that they're ready or not? Like I said, in my example, you tell me my kid's not ready. I go to a private school. That kid successfully completes kindergarten in private school, comes here, and in first grade, that person, he or she, starts first grade.
That's not a guarantee. I think that has to be understood. That's not a guarantee that they're going to start first grade.
Okay.
There's a chronological piece to this, but there's also a readiness piece to this. So just as any student who transfers into our district, there's a review of records, there's a review of readiness at any grade level. When you have a fifth grade or a 5-year-old, 6-year-old student, bridging that first grade kindergarten piece, it may not be determined that if that child is coming in at 5 years old, that child is not demonstrating that he or she has achieved a level of performance that would be ready for first grade, then the decision may not be to put that child in first grade if that child is 5 years old. So there's not a guarantee that that's going to happen.
Okay, well, see, again, the point that you made was no matter what grade they come in, you evaluate them. So I did not know that. So that makes...
Is that true, Damien? Like if a 5th grader came into our school district, they'd be tested to see if they're a 5th grader?
Let me just kind of explain this a little bit. I mean, with any new entrant into our district, there's always a review of records of that child. Sometimes, I will be honest with you, we have kids who come from districts where we cannot retrieve records, or records are not shared or given to us in the manner that we would like. That happens.
Or they come from other countries.
Or they come from other countries, or they come from other states. So, to the degree that we possibly can, we obtain records for review. Again, sometimes the records are more thorough and comprehensive than others, but that's always a step that we take.
Okay. No, thanks for the clarity, because, that really makes it a little better understanding, at least from my viewpoint.
Is that Barbara?
I think that's Barbara.
I'm not sure. I think it's a robot. I guess not.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this? All right, so I guess we will do it by a show of hands. All those in favor of approving the policy with these changes, please raise your hand. And abstain. So that's 1, 2, 3. I can imagine Barbara's raising her hand.
I think she's frozen. Or she's just pretending to be frozen.
I think we know what her vote is
But
anyway.
you can't accept it because you got to be able to see it.
Oh, that's right.
Okay. All right, so that's Teresa, you are in favor of it. Kathy,
Jump
yes.
in.
Seema, yes. Alan, yes. And we're waiting on Barbara.
She's gone.
She's gone. Okay, all those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3.
What about Gloria?
What about
Gloria's
Gloria?
hand is up. She's
That's
up.
4.
So we're,
Actually,
it's tied
Barb
without
better call
Barbara.
because I can't have another meeting and hold this.
Is she back? Yeah, I can see her there.
kind of back. Her mic is muted. But Barbara,
Are we back now?
yes, we just voted.
Oh, well, I'm definitely in favor. I don't know.
Okay.
But we have to see your hand. You can't vote over the phone.
Raise your hand, Barbara.
I solemnly swear.
Okay.
That's the way it was with the audit committee the other day, so that's why I know that.
So the motion to approve the committee, or the change to the policy passes 5 to 4. Okay. Now, may I have a motion to approve the other 3 policies that were on this list? Seema, second. Alan, are there any questions or comments on these policies? Remember, one of them was the suspension regulation that Marie had sent to us via email, or on the board portal. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 9-0, I presume. And now we move to board committee reports. Audit, Teresa?
We met on February 28th, which was last Wednesday. We basically approved, I think it was just about everything that was on the agenda. There was a discussion about our claims auditor, but other than that, everything was...
I'd just like to add, in the discussion for the claims auditor, we did a comparison of, or she did a comparison, which we discussed, and a couple of the members on the committee went out and researched her request to have her wages be more compliant with, or more in line with what she has at the other school district she works. And we had a lengthy discussion over that. I think we agreed that, we were okay with the decision to bring her up gradually so that she was paid equitably like she is at the other school district. Just, that wasn't part of the reports that were out, and I think it's important if we tell people that, okay? Other than that, everything was good.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Business practices, Kathy?
We have a meeting coming up, I believe it's March 14th, is that right? At 8:30. And I know we're discussing Hiawatha Trails. I guess we probably need the latest version of that if we're going to discuss it. And I know there was something else on the agenda. Maybe you can remind me.
We're going to look at some of the budgeting methodologies for some of the major categories of the budget.
Oh, okay, because I thought we were having 2 other meetings to do that.
We'll be confusing them.
I know we have, we scheduled this meeting more recently, meeting on the 14th.
When is that meet? I'm not on that, but I wanted to know in case I
Is it next
I can't
Wednesday?
attend.
It's next
The 14th, yeah.
Wednesday at, I believe, 8:30 in the morning, or 8:15?
8:15?
8:15 here?
Yep.
Communications, Gloria?
We're scheduled to meet March 23rd at Farnsworth at 8 a.m.
Policy committee, Barbara?
We have a meeting coming up on the 19th at 5.
Great, thank you. And now we move to public comment number 2. Linda, has anybody signed up? And then we move on to board issues, ideas, and sharing. Does anybody have anything this evening? Alan?
I just want to comment. I want to thank you for giving us the update on the security. But again, I also echo the comments of the two people here earlier. You know, I think it's something we need to really make sure we have our pulse on at all times. It seems like the conditions of what we've seen over since the beginning of the year seems to be becoming more the norm than the exception like it used to be in the past. So I mean, I think it's very important that our kids and our faculty and everybody that comes to this building feels very safe, or any of the schools for that matter, because, you know, again, I'd hate to see some tragedy happen here in our local community. And what makes it really hit home is last night when they had the lockdown in Utica College, which is just down the street.
Thank you, Alan. Anyone else? Okay, and now we need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Alan, second. Judy? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 9-0. Thank you.